Let us now move on to the presentations of 6 speakers on the theme of global entrepreneurship and startup ecosystems. The first presentation, titled Venture Accelerators in US, will be from Mr. Mukesh Patel, the CEO and co-founder of Juice Tank, one of the biggest co-working space for new startups in New Jersey area. As one of the hot 30 movers and shakers of the New York City startup scene, he is a big inspiration to many new startups and ventures. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Patel to the stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and honoraries and dignitaries, it is an absolute pleasure and honor to present to you today. And on behalf of STEPI, the STEPI Institute, and the Korea Entrepreneurship Foundation, thank you, and you have done an amazing job. And so we, on behalf of the United States of America, absolutely congratulate opportunities to work together, to collaborate, and explore synergies with the foundation and STEPI. May I first also please welcome part of our delegation team from the United States. I would like to just recognize, if you can stand for a moment, Hetal Pastakia Patel, who's our chief catalyst. Allison Rodriguez, who's our chief curator. And I believe he'll be right back. Okay, I'll introduce the third person as soon as he comes. So let's get started. Just to give you a quick sense of the perspective that I'd like to bring in terms of some thoughts and insights. I started my career in the field of statistics and data analytics and economics, with a secondary study in cinematography, directing, entertainment in the filmmaking space, and then got my doctorate degree in law in New York City. So that was kind of phase one. When I was practicing law, I was an advisor to startups, ranging from what they call the idea on a napkin, all the way through the growth stage and exit stage. In that phase, I represented more than 1,000 startup companies in the United States, from the East Coast to the West Coast, in various different industries and disciplines. Then, as an advisor, I sit on a number of advisory boards for startup and growth ventures. As an angel investor, I've invested in several dozen startup companies, again in various industries. In the private equity space, a little bit more institutionalized investing. We invested in a number of companies. As a mentor, I mentor and help startups and help develop ecosystems, startup ecosystems in the United States. And for my own ventures, I've done more than 10 ventures and have raised significant capital on the equity side as well as on the debt side. So the perspective that I bring, and then on the academic side, I now teach at the Rutgers Business School in the global management program there, especially in the entrepreneurship sector. So we teach a course called ICE, and that's the name that has inspired our next company called Icepiration. And ICE is essentially innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship fused together. It's at the intersection of those three spheres. And Juice Tank is a company which is a co-working space and incubator. So through that sphere, we've helped in the last 2 years approximately close to 100 startup companies as well. So by heart, I would say I'm a serial entrepreneur. All the other things are kind of ancillary or adjacent. That's the Rutgers Business School at which we teach our courses in the management and global business. This is the concept of ICE, our innovation creativity course in entrepreneurship. And in this course, what we've done is we've tried new concepts in the academic world. The students are not only business students, so we've opened up the doors. 25% of our students are engineering students, 25% are business students, another 25% are School of Arts and Science, so various different majors, and the last 25% approximately are pre-professional, so pre-medicine, pre-law, accounting, those kind of disciplines. And we take these students and we have them share insights and perspectives in the course and really push them out of their comfort zone. We try to get them to think about the entrepreneurial mindset and the skill sets and practice them in real life. And we introduce them to mentors and serial executives and entrepreneurs and have a more experiential and experimental approach. Juice Tank, we fuel startups, and we do it through the concepts of innovation, advisory, capital, that's the venture launch aspect, and co-working, which is more of a collaborative concept. And we fuse these concepts together in Juice Tank. And Juice Tank, even the name, the tagline, the logo, we crowdsourced it with students around the world to give us thoughts and ideas and feedback, and then we fuse those ideas together to create the concept. So over the last 2.5 years, we've helped many startup companies launch, and we introduce them to funding, bring them shared resources. These are some of the companies. Here are a few more. Just give you an idea that they really are mostly technology-based, but they're also consumer products companies and some product and service companies as well. We also did a new meetup group called New Jersey Entrepreneurs and Technology Startups, where we promote entrepreneurship. And within 2 years, we now have close to about 3,000 members in our meetup group. And we host monthly and bi-monthly events where we bring in CEOs, CMOs, chief marketing officers, chief technology officers to come and share their insights and stories about going through their startups and growth phase. These are some of the pictures of our meetups and events. This is all within our office space, our co-working space. So we can accommodate approximately 50 to 100 startup companies, as well as about 150 guests to come to our events where we try to collaborate and share ideas and insights. Ispiration, as I mentioned, is our new media tech company where we transform fluid thoughts into solid ideas. And we take an approach based on the 3 principles of ICE, which is innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship, and try to fuse those concepts. If you look at new business formation in the US, there's approximately, all these numbers are approximate to give you order of magnitude. More than 500,000 new businesses are created each year in the US. Approximately 50% survive past the 5-year mark, which means 50% fail in less than 5 years. And about 1/3 survive the 10-year mark. But here's an important statistic to note, that 40% of Fortune 500 companies in the United States will be replaced by startups in 10 years. And so there is this amazing opportunity and power that startups have in that ecosystem to really create new companies and innovate that large companies by far have challenges. Because the bigger they are, the harder it is for them to pivot or innovate at the speed that startups can work at. So that's some background and context in terms of that. If we look at angel investing, so angel investors are high net worth individuals, either individually or in groups. We call them angel forums or angel groups. They invest in startup companies at the early stage, the seed stage or the startup stage, sometimes even at a later stage. They will co-invest occasionally, and many times they'll do syndications, which means they will co-invest with other angel groups or venture capital firms as well. Just to give you some context of what's happening in the last 5 to 10 years, 2009, angel investors invested about $18 billion in about close to 60,000 startup businesses in the US. 2013, just about 5 years approximately later, about $25 billion in over 70,000 businesses with an average investment of about $350,000. Accredited investors is a concept. So there's a Securities Act laws in the US, federal laws, that dictate who you can take money from and who you should not take money from. And there's this notion of accredited investors. Those are investors that meet a certain income or net worth test. So currently, that test basically says that the angel investor has to have $200,000 US dollars of income or more per year for 3 years, so 2 years plus the current third year anticipated. Or if they're married jointly, then the test is $300,000, not necessarily doubling the $200,000. Or you can satisfy the net worth test, which is they have a net worth of more than $1 million, excluding the primary residence. So if they satisfy either of these two tests, the income test or the net worth test, they are deemed to be accredited investors, and you can fall under these exemptions that allow you to accept money from them with minimal costs, minimal filings, and regulatory compliance. You do have to still find an exception to the regulations for registration, so they're known as Reg D under the Act. And there are currently about 8.5 million accredited investors in the US, and about 300,000 of them are what's known as active investors that actively invest in startups and growth ventures. On the venture capital side, VCs, as we call them, invest about $25 billion in 4,000 businesses, and that was last year, approximately. And 20% of all US public companies were actually funded at one time or another by a venture capital firm, so they play a very important role in the entrepreneurial ecosystem there. And 30% of the market value of all public companies are actually accounted by VC-funded companies. There's approximately 500 to 1,000 active VC firms in the US, depending on which you're looking at and which funds they're raising. So VCs tend to raise a series of funds from limited partners, also known as LPs. Silicon Valley, which is kind of our heartbeat of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the US, was developed in the late 1950s through the 1970s. It represents close to, or if not more than, 1/3 of all VC investments in the US. And there's currently about 50 private companies in the US that were startups or are startups valued more than $1 billion. And the term for that, they call them, is unicorn. It's this mythological, I guess, character of a horse with a horn and some powers. So when we think about globalization of startups, we think about clusters of activities. So in the US, you start with Silicon Valley on the West Coast in California, then you go to Boston, which is probably our second strongest entrepreneurial ecosystem, where Harvard University and MIT University are there. And then the third would probably be New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, what we call the New York tri-state metro region. There's also Chicago, Illinois, Austin, Texas, Washington, DC, Virginia. And then there's also other areas like Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, and other communities. Globally, the US is very active and works with lots of global entrepreneurial ecosystems. And I think Korea offers a very unique and interesting opportunity. We have just been here for a few days, but I can tell you that from our perspective and what we're doing in terms of assessment, foundations like STEPI and the Korea Entrepreneurship Foundation and the government here are really playing an active role. And I think there are huge opportunities for Korea, especially on a global scale, to collaborate. Korea is already doing it, and it's gone through multiple phases, but I think this next phase could be quite remarkable as well. So on a global map level, that's kind of just a visualization of where the startup activities are happening around the world in terms of founded startups. Here's another one in terms of accelerated startups by region. So if you look at North America, Europe, Asia, South America, Middle East, I think are very prominent hubs in growth by year. This goes up to 2013. Now, when we talk about what is the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the US, we primarily talk about idea labs, innovation labs, which includes everything from engineering printing to wet labs for the pharma, biotech, healthcare space, to maker spaces where there's sensors and lots of different elements that can be put together to create technologies, design labs, such as Ideal Labs near Stanford or at Stanford University in California. There's incubators, which help incubate new concepts and startups. There's accelerators, co-working spaces, and then universities, which play a very big role, especially in terms of sourcing intellectual capital and talent. Most universities have OTCs, Office of Technology Commercialization, or tech transfers to help commercialize some of their intellectual property. In terms of incubators worldwide, there are some estimates out there that in 2012 there were at least 7,000 incubators globally. 2015, somewhere between 10 to 15,000. And if you look at it in terms of per million, 1 million people, 1 to 2 incubators per million people. In Asia, there's about 2,000 plus incubators. United States went from 12 incubators in 1980 to 2,000, let's say this year, which is on average about 4 incubators per 1 million people. And about 1/3 of them are based or affiliated with universities. In terms of accelerators, so accelerators in the US, incubators and accelerators are historically have been interchangeable. And some people call them incubators, others call them accelerators. But today, I think the definitions are starting to crystallize a little bit more. They're being refined and they're expanding. So if we look at this, accelerators try to give education and mentorship and advisory services, access to capital. So similar to incubators, but accelerators don't have to be at a specific location. Just to give you an example, 2015, there's somewhere between 250 to 1,000 accelerators worldwide, and we have about 100 plus in the US now that are more clearly defined as accelerators as opposed to incubator accelerators. Our most prominent one is Y Combinator. Started with just 8 startups in 2005. They funded over close to 1,000 of them annually. So basically they provide capital for a certain amount of equity, and I've included some numbers here. And they have batches, so they have 3-month programs, and they have a community that they've established. Their portfolio values are quite significant, and 40% of their applications come from overseas. Techstars is another one, and their average admission rate is about 1% based on the number of applications they get. And they try to bring together the angel investors and VCs during their demo day. They also take equity for a certain amount of capital, and they have raised significant capital, all the companies that go through their accelerator program. 500 Startups is another one. 50 countries now, 2,000 founders that they've supported, and 1,000 plus companies. So let me just give you a sense of some trends that we're seeing. If you look at the human population in the planet, it's about 7.2 billion people. The internet population is about 2.5 billion. The number of mobile devices alone matches or is greater than the human population in the US, and that does not include digital technical sensors. So this is not the IoT, Internet of Things, just mobile devices alone. In the next few years, more than 500 million new internet users will come onto the internet, which will create even more companies and products and services and opportunities. And just to give you some context, it started with 1,000 hosts at universities in 1984. Within 15 years, it went to 50 million users, then 1 billion users 11 years later, and then you shrink the time, just 3 years later, 2 billion. Last year, about 2.7 billion users. In terms of content on the internet, every 24 internet hours, which is 1 day of human life, 500 years of YouTube videos on Facebook and on YouTube, 1 billion on mobile devices every day. Every 60 seconds or 1 minute, here's some statistics of how many tweets on Twitter and posts on Facebook and Google searches. This gives you a sense of even more data of what happens every minute, every day today on the internet and technologies. I won't spend too much time on the data since the slides have been provided, but just to show you commerce in general, global e-commerce every 30 seconds. And there's a breakdown of mobile sales versus desktop sales and different types of electronic payments. By category, apparel, furniture, home goods, beauty, personal care, media, tech, toys. Just, that's every 30 seconds. Social media used to look like this not too long ago. Then it looked like this maybe just recently for the adults. This is kind of where it's heading, and this is where it is today, especially for the next young generation. They're born into this world, they get it, they understand it, they thrive on this. In terms of trend, everything's going social, mobile, content, big data, commerce, personalization, and IoT, Internet of Things. So this is one of our models. You have to have a scalable business model. So you start with the concept of think big, think global, start small, validate your idea, do iterations, called the lean methodology, and then scale really fast. And we look up to mentors in the entrepreneurial space like Elon Musk, who talks about failure, and the concept is fail fast so you can succeed faster. That's how you disrupt. And everyone probably knows about SpaceX and Tesla Motors, and I was revolutionizing all these companies. Co-founder of PayPal's, and then Tesla, SpaceX, and doing things that most people could not imagine. Here's another person, crazy ideas. Most investors, when he originally pitched his idea, did not agree with it, never invested. The experts, no one invested. It's only people who thought he was crazy enough to try something disruptive. And that's Jeff Bezos from Amazon. Here's a picture from 2004 when they called him Inside the Crazy Mind. Here's another young entrepreneur from Stanford, dream big, knew nothing about the healthcare or biotech pharma space, hated giving blood as a blood test, so wanted to change it, disrupt it. No experience in that space. And with the help of teams and other people and advisors, including her professors at Stanford, she basically started a company called Theranos at the age of 19 as a college sophomore at Stanford, which revolutionized the blood diagnostics company. Her company today is worth maybe close to $20 billion. This number's just last year. And so these slides have to get updated every 6 months, so the valuation kind of doubles. So Elizabeth Holmes. Here's another woman who had an idea for garments that make women look more fit and athletic. And she pitched it to 100 investors. No one invested in her company. She started the company, credit cards, $5,000, became one of the first female billionaires, self-made billionaires, from $5,000 to $1 billion, with a concept that no one thought was a good idea. No one wanted to invest in her. These guys thought, why are eyeglasses so expensive? And so they decided to make less expensive eyeglasses called Warby Parker. They've raised significant capital. The last time I looked, it was close to maybe $100 million or plus. Even corporate companies are investing in them, including VCs, and they're revolutionizing the way something as simple as eyeglasses can be brought to the marketplace. These guys get into a lot of trouble, but you may have heard of their company called Airbnb. The concept is renting an apartment or a house that someone else lives in and instead of a hotel. And they launched with $20,000 from Y Combinator and Accelerator. They're valued maybe close to 10 to 20 billion today. It's the third or fourth largest hotel company in the world, and they don't own even one hotel. Here's another one, supply and demand. You may have heard of the company Uber, same concept, crowdsourcing supply and matching it with demand. At the age of 33, launched Uber, valued more than, I think, 20 or 30 billion dollars now, bigger than the two largest car rental companies or service companies in the US, and they don't own a single car. So these are some of the critical elements to start a successful ecosystem. Collaborate, share practices, shared resources. Get the most successful entrepreneurs involved and tell them to give back and mentor. Develop capital funds, provide educational support, and then create these centers of excellence for entrepreneurship. This is kind of visualization of what we do at Juice Tank and at Ispiration. We start with the entrepreneur at the center, and we surround them with shared resources, advisors, investors, technology, help them focus on industries. Investors and advisors help them create the right angle for capital. And then there's strategic partners like universities and labs. Advice, if you're an entrepreneur, team is the most important thing. Surround yourself with 2 or 4 co-founders. Being a solo entrepreneur is very tough. And more than 4 may be complex. Speed is important. And from what we've seen, Korea is amazing at speed and efficiency. So I think they already have the right elements. Iterate, do it in small steps. Don't worry about perfecting the good or the service or the technology. Just get it out there and then continue to improve constantly. Focus on the customers. They give you 2 great resources, great advice and also capital because they want to buy your products. Focus on customer experience. Watch your burn rate. So whatever capital you have, make it stretch as much as you can and then pivot as necessary and don't give up. These are the 3 most important dots. I call them capital dots. Intellectual capital, which are your ideas, human capital, which is your team, and financial capital, which is, money. If you can figure out how to triangulate these 3 elements first, before anything else, you're set up for success. You've heard of the concept of 6 degrees of separation, which means you can connect to anyone in the world within 6 people. So I may know Professor Bay, and he may know someone else, and they may know a 3rd person, and so on. I don't think this holds true anymore because of technology and the internet and social media. I call it the 3.x degrees of separation, somewhere between 3.1 and 3.9 people. You can today connect with almost anyone in the world. And with that, I leave you with thank you and best of luck with your entrepreneurial endeavors, with your ecosystems, and we are open for business in the United States. We welcome all of you to collaborate with us, and we are so honored to be here. And I just wanted to also introduce our 3rd delegate, Paul Rodriguez here, who's our chief advocate. And with that, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Potter, for your presentation. Before you step down, we would like to have a short Q&A.
Sure.
So please, 리시버 좀 전달해 주시겠어요? Please give him the translation receiver. Okay. We've got some questions during the pre-registration. 저희가 사전 등록을 통해서 사전 질문들을 좀 받았습니다. 많은 질문들을 주셨는데 저희가 몇 가지 시간 관계상 제가 한 가지만 골라서 질문 드리도록 하겠습니다. I read it for the translation. 제가 통역을 위해 잠깐 읽겠습니다. 네, 이 질문 드려볼게요. 미국 뉴저지나 뉴욕을 비롯한 동부 지역이 기존의 서부 쪽 실리콘밸리와 비교해서 창업 생태계 차원에서 어떠한 차이가 있는지 궁금합니다.
Okay, so the question is, what is the big difference between the startup ecosystem in Silicon Valley and the Northeast, which is the New Jersey, New York tri-state area? I would say that the entire country in the US looks up to and respects what Silicon Valley has done. They are the oldest and most successful startup ecosystem in the United States. And all the other startup ecosystems in the US are either younger, newer, or have less resources in terms of capital or human talent. In terms of growth opportunities, I think some of the newer ecosystems have some amazing opportunities to grow and learn. And one of the things we're trying to do in the other ecosystems is not necessarily copy Silicon Valley. it is extremely challenging to just duplicate and replicate, nor do we feel that that's the right approach. So what all the other ecosystems try to do is to be inspired by Silicon Valley, collaborate with Silicon Valley, but not necessarily copy Silicon Valley. We try to adapt it to our local talent, our local conditions, maybe regulatory conditions, geographic conditions, sources of capital limitations, perhaps. But we do definitely look up to and reach Silicon Valley for inspiration. Another thing that's happening now is because of globalization, is that it's easier and easier for the next generation of entrepreneurs to be anywhere in the country and still launch amazing companies. Some of the challenges are that the investors in the different ecosystems have a different mindset than the ones in Silicon Valley. So they tend to be more like traditional bankers. So when they think about equity, they also try to introduce debt, or they will take less risk, perhaps, whereas the investors in Silicon Valley really understand risk and risk-taking, and they're not afraid of failure. They actually encourage the concept of taking risks and experimenting and growing companies and thinking big. So a lot of times, even in New Jersey or New York, if we find a company that's a startup that has great opportunities and they're having challenges raising capital in our local area, we will suggest to them to spend some time in Silicon Valley, expand their network, and once they get the resources they need, sometimes they come back to the East Coast. And even if they don't, it doesn't matter. We don't define our success by limitations of geography. We are trying to define success by collaboration and helping startup companies grow into big companies and opportunities and economic development, regardless of whether they're based in the West Coast or the East Coast. But we have a lot of respect for Silicon Valley, and we try to learn from their insights and practices, but we adapt them to our own. And we encourage other countries to do the same thing. So hopefully I've answered that question.
Okay, thank you. One more last question from the floor by Simplo system. Please show me the Simplo. Okay, there are so many questions from the Simplo, but I choose one question. Please. Okay. Down. Okay, I choose this one. Okay, I read it for translation. 주스탱크에 찾아오는 방문객 중에 카피만을 목적으로 하는 등 나쁜 방문객에 대한 대책은 있나요? 라는 질문 주셨습니다. How to treat the red guest?
That's a great question. So startups often ask me, I have an idea, but I can't tell you, because I'm afraid that whoever I tell will just copy my idea and go ahead and run with it. And in Silicon Valley especially, in Silicon Alley, which is our side on the East Coast, the philosophy is that if you have an idea, you almost have to assume that thousands of other entrepreneurs have the exact same idea at the same time. So it's not about the idea. The idea is not where the value is. The value is in sharing the idea with very smart, trusted mentors, advisors, VC firms or angel investors or other serial entrepreneurs. And by sharing the idea with more people, you get feedback, especially with customers, you get feedback. It's not the idea, it's the execution of the idea. So the faster you can execute, that is what creates companies and results. That doesn't mean that you have to share all the critical details and the secret sauce or the intellectual property of your idea. You can share your idea with basic information that's not proprietary, but at least gives enough information to the ecosystem to help you. And as you grow and develop, once you have your patents, perhaps, if it's a technology company, or you've protected your intellectual property, you can then start sharing information in more detail with more people later on. So the same thing with Juice Tank and other things like our accelerator, Ispiration. We openly share our ideas, and we welcome people to collaborate with us. Does that mean that some people will not come and copy things and duplicate it? That will always happen. We look at it as flattery, that someone actually thought highly about the idea and wanted to replicate it, but it's all about the execution. So we're not afraid of sharing insights and practices, or, you know, and I talk to so many other entrepreneurs, and they always give advice openly. In fact, the best investors, the VCs, angel investors, they don't even sign NDAs, which are non-disclosure agreements or confidentiality agreements. And if you as an entrepreneur actually proposed a confidentiality agreement to prominent investors in the US, they will look at you as being naive and not experienced. So you have to know the audience that you're speaking to and recognize that they see thousands of ideas pitched to them every year. So they cannot keep track of confidentiality agreements or NDAs. It's not possible. It's not practical. They're in the business of ideas and launching companies. So it's all about sharing ideas, but moving fast in execution, not so much copies. So is there a risk? Yes. But if we were afraid of the risk, we would not be entrepreneurs. So it's all about being an entrepreneur that's willing to take risks, move fast, work within the ecosystem, and share ideas and best practices. In fact, most of the best VCs in America have invested in competitors. And they have taken an oath that they will not share information that needs to be confidential. And they try their best to really uphold that. But that allows them to help all their companies grow through a rising tide because they have the expertise to do that. And when they see opportunities for collaboration or acquisitions, they will also share that with their portfolio companies. But they do it in a very proper, careful way. So hopefully that answered your question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Please give Mr. Potter give a big applause. Okay. Thank you.